Today's amazing guest is Dave Huber. Dave is a design practice lead for IBM's Cloud and Cognitive Software division. He recently published a Business of Design field guide and worked with IBM's Chief Design Officer to create Business of Design resources and workshops for their over 600 designers. Dave, my friend, welcome to the show. Super stoked to be talking with you.
Hey, Jay, thanks for having me, man. Excited to be here.
Man, I love that. We both got that glass game going on. Like, I got the blue glasses, and
Yeah.
I can't pull out those glasses. Let me just tell you that. I've tried those on at Warby Parker, but I can't pull them off.
Yeah. Yep. They fit. The shoe fits. Wear
it. So, you're a video pro, right? So you're really good at video editing and stuff. And I've seen some of your productions and I'm like, man, this is like those like Netflix style, like who even says Hollywood style, but now it's like Netflix style, like super
Thank you.
kick-ass. Walk me through Dave as a child. Was Dave as a child always creative? Like, who was Dave as a child? Like, what were his hobbies and interests?
I love it. Jumping right to it. It's like a therapy session in a good way. When I was a kid, I was running around with a camera, video camera. In like middle school, we had a family. It was a tape, tape cassette recorder. It wasn't even digital yet. And a kid down the street had an early bootleg version of Adobe Premiere Pro and gave me a copy. And I started making videos when I was a kid. So the version of me when I was young is similar to who I am now, I think.
Wait, how old were you when you actually like started learning the Adobe tools and video editing?
That was middle school, 7th grade, so 13, however old kids are then.
Oh my God. Because that era, we didn't have that many internet video tutorials and all these things. So how did you actually teach yourself like just the tool and just all the ins and outs of video editing?
Yeah, big fat book. Adobe Premiere Pro for Dummies or something, and trial and error. Yeah, I'd have to convert the cassette tape to a digital file, so it would play it back. The computer would capture that, make it digital, and then I'd start editing it and adding music and titles, and it was like making magic,
Oh my God! And then you have this passion for video. You're doing a lot of that. Walk me through what happens after college. What made you choose to pursue the route of being like a videographer, video producer?
Yeah. After college, I graduated with a business degree and didn't want to go into a corporate gig right away. I thought, trying to find and create value for clients with videography, what became really cool was making music videos for fun. And then people would ask for a commercial and then a Kickstarter video, and I keep getting paid for it, and trying to help them hone their message and have them look their best and deliver it in a compelling way. To me, was just something worth learning how to do. So I'd rather be kind of poor and a freelance videographer trying to make quality content for my clients than have some kind of boring corporate job, which I have now. No, I'm just kidding.
So this is amazing. You said Kickstarter, and I cannot emphasize the importance of video for a Kickstarter project. The video is literally what makes or breaks the whole project. The video is the only artifact, at least initially, the people who are backing a Kickstarter project are going to see. And, the thing is when I'm an amateur, video editor, I suck. But I remember when I started on that journey, there's this thing where you want to put in all the fancy cuts and have flames popping in the background, all this new filter you want to put in and show everyone look, I'm a video pro and all these cool techniques. What made you, when you're working with clients, really focus in on the value or the message you're communicating in those videos?
Yeah, it's the same mindset that I think is serving me well now with this business of design way of thinking, which is it's about the outcome. If it looks great, but it's not causing your audience to click on that call to action, if it's not actually converting people. And so in some ways it's getting, not just getting the video right, but getting the right video. And I think that's kind of a fundamental concept in design, which is so great, getting not only getting the idea right, but getting the right idea, taking that time to frame what it is that we should even be making to begin with before we start to make it all polished. But when I was young, just making it polished was enough. So.
Wow. So you're saying that if you're a professional videographer and you can make the most slickest video, but if it doesn't solve the client's need, whatever that need might be, you're saying that then the videographer has not done a good job or could even get fired?
Tough to say. There's probably a
Yeah,
distribution of effectiveness. I don't know if there's a hard and
yeah,
fast rule on that, but the notion that, and it goes back to testing and measurement, which I think is a big
yeah.
theme for the design MBA mindset that I have, which is you can't manage what you don't measure. And so, you could have a really slick video that's 5 seconds versus a more in-depth emotional piece that's 30 seconds. And people could debate all day about which one's going to be more effective. And the only way to find out is to prototype them both and test it. And I think that's the same thing we find in
Wow.
software design and other business ventures.
And this is amazing because like what I'm seeing the parallels is that you've taken this mindset of like creating videos that from your previous background where you had to hone in the message for the client, help them get their message across, and focus more on those needs rather than just the slickness of the video, how cool the video is, but kind of like merging both.
Yeah.
And you've brought that together at IBM, where you work, and you've been working and spearheading a lot of those initiatives around the business of design. It's just mind blowing. So my first question is, a lot of designers, when we like the first thing that we think about is usually like, why should I give a damn about business? Like, I just want to make like cool designs. I want to make like things that are super cool that people like. Why should I even give a damn about design? So what do you say to that, Dave?
Yeah. Well, we're all doing design by some company for business, and we're there because they pay us. So we're already in the business of design. And I think there are some people who just like to kind of make visual decorations, and there are needs for that. I just recently went to a great public workshop on a guy who's making posters for music festivals, and they're beautiful. They're great. And so for people who want to do that type of visual design that's more closer to art, that's totally cool. We need some of that. That can be a healthy, happy way to kind of have a career. So nothing against that. For me personally, I'm interested in how systems deliver outcomes. And so making sure that what we're trying to make is delivering on what matters, and having an outcome that's kind of sustainable, and knowing whether we're moving the ball forward or backwards. It's I think once people are on enough teams where they maybe work all year and look back and go, "Gosh, we actually kind of made the wrong thing," or I think we framed the problem the wrong way. It's like, man, we just wasted a whole year solving the wrong problem. It looks great, it's beautiful, but it's not actually moving the ball forward. At some point that becomes frustrating. I think people, in some ways, it gamifies design. You say, okay, you're asking me to redesign this landing page. I could do that and give it to you and personally be pleased by it. But it's much more interesting, I think, to say, well, let me figure out if the audience, the customers, the end users actually find it more engaging. And in some ways, it makes everything more of a science experiment. And it really puts us at the mercy of our users. We're at their service, and getting them to be the ultimate judges of the quality of something. That's, I think, a really beautiful challenge. It's like solving a mystery in a way, and it brings humility to teams because nobody is suddenly the expert. We kind of leave it up to the end users, the customers, to help us decide or to measure how we're moving the ball forward or backwards for them and the business.
And this is amazing thing you said, that you're very much interested in the systems design of thing. You want to create a system that ensures that it's sustainable and it continuously creates design that helps meet the business goals. But then one could say that, man, like if it's a big company, like IBM or any other company, just hire like smart people and just let them do their thing. Why do we need a system in place? Why can't we just let people do their thing and it just turns out okay?
I think hiring smart people is a good goal, and hopefully those smart people say, "Hey, we've been doing this." There's a great book called like Upstream Effects, and humans have kind of a tendency to respond to problems as they come downstream. And so hopefully somebody can go upstream and say, "Hey, instead of us solving the problem every time it comes down to us, we're going to go upstream, prevent the problem from even happening, and make it a systemic or perpetual solution that requires less work over time." And that kind of highlights a big theme, which I think all designers with an MBA or business mindset need to know, which is return on investment. Everything we're doing, and it's a very simple concept, I think, for humans and primates and animals, is the juice worth the squeeze? And so when we're hiring smart people, putting in good systems, are we evaluating the bang for the buck, the return on investment? And I think when we make systems that endure, the operating costs are lower. which makes the return on investment higher.
And there's an amazing quote. I hope I don't butcher, but it was so amazing that you shared with me in one of our earlier conversations. You said that as designers, we're either helping generate money for the company or helping cut costs. And that was so powerful because I think a lot of times as designers, we just want to do good design, and really we don't want to like venture into the business side of things. So I think that quote was so eye opening for me. Like that's what they're
Yeah.
paying my bills. So the company's paying my bills. I can't just sit all day and create beautiful design that doesn't solve the business needs.
Yeah. Yep, it's true. I mean, every system, whether it's a business or nonprofit organization or even an ecological system, has inputs and outputs. And, it's like energy coming in and energy going out for humans. We have to have enough energy coming in to sustain what's going out. And it's the same for businesses. And so when we lift our heads up a little bit higher as designers and look around at the broader picture, it's pretty fundamental to recognize that, okay, the organizations we operate within need to be self-sustaining. If things are costing more than they're generating, it's a system that degrades over time and eventually falters. And so, whether it's business or nonprofits or any other system, I think recognizing, all right, money coming in, money coming out, and that's an equation, it's a ratio, and you can impact both of those. And oftentimes we do, we're just not fully able to articulate or measure the impact of it.
And this literally just came to my mind. A lot of listeners on the show are, designers that aspire to go into leadership. Some of them are already there. And I'm just throwing this scenario at you, but just like to kind of get your thoughts on it. So like a designer that's just been promoted, or they're like a design executive, they've been hired by a company that, hey, our design is not that good. We want you to come in and ramp up the entire design practice. So that's the context of where they are. But now this person has hired a bunch of designers. But how should they even go about doing the thing that you've done at IBM, that you've spearheaded the business of design at IBM? How could they now replicate something like that at their company where they can actually measure that, okay, I was hired to start a design practice, hire a bunch of designers, but how do I even go about measuring the right thing? What should I even measure to justify that this was a good amount spent on starting a design practice at the company?
That's a big question, and it's an important question for people that are kind of overseeing design programs, right? Those are expensive investments. They need millions and millions of dollars to buy all these designers, and maybe an executive says, "Hey, this looks great. Our products look better. I hear our customers are happier using them." But is that covering the cost of what we're spending on all these designers? Is this efficient? Is it effective? And so I think if I understand your question, what should somebody in a position overseeing a design program measure to be able to articulate the impact of that investment? Well, you're either saving money or helping generate more money. And so you kind of look at both of those. All right, how are we creating more value on the bottom line? Which is really cool because I remember reading, a lot of people who studied business back in the day would go on to be consultants. And most consultants were focused on saving costs, cutting costs, and making things more efficient, because it's actually easier to do that than it is to kind of figure out how to generate new additional value. But designers are really good at that. They say, man, I think our customers would love this. Or, I noticed on a community thread, people keep saying this thing's their favorite part, and they would actually pay more for it if it was just a little bit better. So, generate new value by doing the user research. So somehow you're going to have to make sure the system is measuring additional revenue and how much time and money is being saved. And the ratio of those two things are important. You can actually keep revenue the same and cut costs, but make your business more profitable and leaner. Now, the hard part about this is laddering up. So people say, okay, well, I improved a user experience, or I made things more consistent across our products. I know that makes our customers happier, but how do I put a dollar sign behind that? And that's something that we were looking for when we were making the field guide for the business of design for IBM's cloud and cognitive software. And we couldn't find anything. And so we spoke with a couple people who had their MBAs, a couple people who were in design. We prototyped some ideas. We kind of would play it back to people. And we ultimately landed on this ladder of this concept of laddering up. At the top of the ladder, you have business outcomes like revenue, profit, market share. And obviously that's where we want to get. At the bottom, we have a user outcomes like a faster time to value, reduced error rates, increased task completion rates, quantified ways of helping track how well we're helping them use our tools. And in social media platforms, it's a little bit different, but we're in the kind of enterprise B2B space. That's where IBM's at. And so we make tools for other businesses to use. So they really do have specific jobs to be done. So those user outcomes on the bottom, like task completion rate. And then at the top of the ladder, you have those business outcomes. Well, what's in the middle? And this was often the missing link between connecting the qualitative improvements in the user experience and the quantitative impact on the business outcomes. And so we call those product outcomes in between. So things like churn and conversion, customer lifetime value, in a way, these are all kind of these interim metrics that that you can use with some very simple math to say, okay, well, conversion. So the task completion rate for the new sign-up flow is twice as high. So we're getting an increase, 20% increase in customer conversions. The average revenue per user is X. So the new number that came through times how much money we generally make from each one of them is, ta-da, additional revenue. So it's a relatively simple math. Sometimes it's just a plus sign and a multiply sign, maybe a little bit of division. And when I was interviewing distinguished designers at IBM to learn more about this, one of them who was doing it and really good, she just called it back of napkin math, which I really like. I think if the mindset is just that, you can get a napkin out, multiply, a few simple numbers, and you're able to estimate ideally how much revenue you're creating, or with other equations, how much money you're helping the company save.
I am a bit speechless at the moment because I have to date not heard a better explanation live on air of what
Nice.
the business of design is. Like
Okay.
I'm not even sugarcoating. I really mean it. Like I was literally hoping that please don't stop. Please keep saying more. It was
Oh, thanks, man.
it's so simple because suddenly what you just said makes sense. Like I want to make, as a designer, the customer flow like visually beautiful or more intuitive or frictionless. Maybe I want to cut down some flows to make the speed faster. But then you said that in the middle, there could be some outcomes like, hey, we reduce the task completion time, which customers enjoy. And because they enjoy, maybe they stay longer or upgrade their service, which leads to the top outcome, which is the company's goal. What they want is X amount of dollars of revenues. And it's suddenly it's so simple. But then my thing is, if I am having an aha moment right here, and I'm like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. Why is it so many companies still struggle with this? I mean, I know it's obviously, I mean, you can't speak to all the
Yeah.
companies, but I'm just kind of wondering, why is everyone not doing this?
I think it's lack of accountability in a way. I think, and some companies do. Some companies have really clear outcome defined OKRs, and those are great for software teams. If you're making a physical product, you're asked to make a bicycle, you're asked to write policy or make a book. Oftentimes, our goals are output. They're framed as outputs. Make this thing, and oftentimes we aren't even held accountable to the outcome that's supposed to deliver on. The leaders above say, this is what I want you to make. And we say, great, we'll go do it. And if the leaders aren't defining the outcome of what that thing is supposed to deliver on, then from the top down, it's kind of everyone's just like, well, you told me to make this thing and I'm on salary, so I made this thing. Here you go. Whether or not it's good, it's not my fault. You asked for it. Here it is. And we say, yep, that's right. Thanks for making it. It looks really good. We'll figure out if it's even delivering on the thing, on the outcome that's intended to later, or maybe we won't, because honestly, the instrumentation and tracking of metrics it can just be really hard. And so, if the boss's boss says this looks great, I like it, you get a promotion anyway. So I think it's not only a lack of accountability like vertically. I think it's lack of accountability personally, but it's also just training. I think a lot of us, I went to business school and design school, and I wasn't taught this. It wasn't until
Oh, you weren't?
I mean, some of the underlying concepts, obviously, like this
Yeah.
is making money, saving money, but no, like this thread between these two disciplines, design and business. I have a bachelor's degree in business, a master's degree in design, was never brought up, and so in academia, it's not there. The training isn't there, and so. It's not really anyone's fault, to be honest, because it's just not a practice. just as user experience design wasn't a practice 20 years ago, and it almost makes natural evolutionary sense that first we have to learn how to do user experience design before we have to learn to measure how effective it is. And I think the industry is just so young that it took this long for us to figure out, hey, is this even making an impact?
And I asked you that question because I know a lot of design managers and designer friends who literally go to an MBA because it's like, well, Janelle, I don't know how to speak the business language. I want to communicate better with the business partners. So I'm just going to get this MBA. So they view this MBA as this magical thing that will somehow make them overnight, or not overnight, but like after 2 years, is better at doing all those things. And it's really refreshing to hear someone say that if that's the sole goal you're going for, you may not be 100% satisfied.
Yeah, true. Well said. I mean, an MBA is a badge of some approval. I do think the literacy that it provides is great, and some programs are more innovative than others. I've seen these design MBAs. Obviously that's kind of the topic that you have here because there's a demand for it. Um, I think, yeah, we're getting there. It's exciting to see the progress.
Now imagine the head of design comes to you, and I keep going back to the example, like some head of design comes to you and you're like, oh my God, Dave, I totally understand your model. I understand what layering up is. I'm going to have like, outcomes at the bottom that care from more of like the customer perspective than the middle stuff. And then, how is it going to affect the revenue of the company? Oh my God, this is awesome. And then maybe I'll write a Medium article on it and I'll share that within the company. And I've seen so many times where in companies and stuff where the vision is awesome, just like you said, like the PowerPoint deck or the keynote is awesome. Everything makes sense on paper. But there's a lot of effort that has to be done to really translate that vision on paper and that deck into reality. So can you give some examples of what, like some of the things that you and your team did at IBM to make sure that this is not just a vision, but is actually implemented and people are accountable for it?
Yeah, make sure I understand the question correctly. You're saying it's easy to depict something in slides, whether it's a design or the business of design, but actually applying it is harder. So how does a team bridge the
Yeah. So
gap?
like what systems would one create? So like, I mean, this example you shared with me, right? That's awesome. Like I totally get what business of design is now or how should one go about it. But then how do I go about implementing it on my team? Like, what
Mm,
would I do? Like, what systems would I put in place? Is there
mm,
trainings I should do?
yeah,
Is there some accountability or some frameworks you have, or designers have to go through this
yeah.
step by step process to make sure that this model is followed?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I think for the business, for great design, and in this question, a lot of it falls on behavioral psychology in a way. And so, I think if we frame, a well-framed problem is largely solved. What is the problem in this instance that you're presenting, which is a very common one? It's not, people often say we need to educate our designers on how to do this, and that's kind of true. That's part of it. But what we really want to do is have our design teams be in the habit of doing this thing. Again, this is a perpetual system in a way. A habit is a kind of effective perpetual system. So better, well-phrased problem is how do we get our design teams in the habit of doing the business of design is maybe one way to phrase it here, or get them in the
Love
habit
it.
of measuring their impact and articulating that you're defining business outcomes, aligning around them, delivering on them, and articulating their impacts. How do we get our teams in the habit of doing those things? Is a beautiful question. And looking at behavior psychology, I don't know if you've heard of the Stanford Design Institute, or was it the Stanford Behavior Design Institute with BJ Fogg? But there's a very simple equation, which is behavior will occur when there is sufficient motivation, ability, and a trigger. So those three things need to be focused on for getting teams um, to do this, what we're talking about here, the business of design. And so motivation, ability, and trigger. So ability is the education part. People have to know how to do this. So training, workshops, those are all totally valid and useful. Motivation, so keeping them inspired on this. So maybe that is compensation. Hey, you'll get a cash bonus at the end of the year if you can articulate how you drove increase in revenue or cut some costs for the business. So somehow getting motivation, even start with why is great there. Show, don't tell. Stories are great. Creating culture is good in this context. The rituals and traditions. Maybe you come up with a ritual of celebrating, the most impactful design award or something. Hey, this this design here for our team increased conversion by 4x and generated an additional $4.5 million in revenue this year. Right? So you maybe celebrate these people. So create a culture that motivates people. And then T is for trigger. So again, the formula very simple. Behavior will occur when it's sufficient motivation, ability, and trigger. So B equals MAT is how I remember it. And this final one is a trigger, which is oftentimes either a mental, environmental, social, could be time-based. There are a bunch of different types of triggers, but this one's most often overlooked because people will forget to do things unless there's a trigger. And eventually those become intrinsic triggers. You just remember to do it. But initially they kind of need to be external or extrinsic triggers in a way. So, at the end of every month, every team checks in on this, or there's a automated Slack notification that pings up and says, "Hey, don't forget to check this." So yeah, that's what I think teams should think about is creating habits, which are based on behaviors. And there's also this habit loop from Charles Duhigg, the cue, routine, reward. Just like, unfortunately, we're not too distant from Pavlovian dogs here. Ring a bell, give us a cookie, we'll start to salivate when that bell is rung. In some ways, product teams need those cue, routine, and rewards, but wrapped up, I think, in a culture that supports and celebrates this and making it something that people relish in a way. Maybe there's fun and games involved, and it's not just a stick, but a carrot. People say, "Oh, whoever wins the most impactful team gets to wear, the jester hat or the king's hat for 3 days. It gets to change their Slack photo to have some, celebratory decoration." Make it fun, because too often these initiatives are just seem like mandates from top down, and giving it this grassroots bottom up celebration and ownership of pride in knowing that the work that they're doing is having a specific impact and being able to quantify and articulate that. To me, those are all the things I think about when thinking about how a design program should adopt this new culture, really made up of habits in which design teams relish the opportunity to know their impact on the business.
And right there at the end, you said this thing where a lot of times these design program outcomes and celebrations seem like they're just top down. They're not really bottom up. What do you mean by that? Like, can you have an example where it feels like just like a top down versus what would be actually like a bottom up example?
Yeah, and sometimes it's just the messaging, and this is tough pill to swallow as I hear it out loud for myself, which is that sometimes you can orchestrate things with the leadership, but have it be announced not by the highest paid person, but have it be announced by somebody who is maybe really involved in the grassroots. Sometimes it's just how it's presented. So it can have, ideally there's the support of leadership, but rather than them owning the messaging and dictating how it's done, the leadership just says, "Hey, I'd like for you new hires, go to the new hires. Hey, you guys have been here 6 months. We want to invest in celebrating and owning and having a culture that is prideful of measuring the impact of our work. You guys go figure out how to create an event that celebrates the people who are doing that well, and we're gonna support it." So they're giving them that autonomy. You're telling them kind of the outcome that you want, but not how to get there, and give them some funding and let them put on some event. But the organizational chart is tricky because then you also need to talk to the managers. You need to tell the managers, "Hey, we've had our new hires. We just asked them to do this. Is it okay if we get a little bit of their time?" Go up to the directors. "Hey, by the way," so you have to message everybody. My understanding and my advice or what's worked for me is messaging everybody up and down that totem pole, give them all slightly different message, just getting their buy-in, giving them a heads up, because nobody likes to see things come, from under them. You don't want to see that your team's working on something that you didn't give them the time for. So lots of messaging up and down the totem pole, and giving ownership to some of the younger tiered employees to maybe start a new cultural program.
I would love that way more than if the chief design officer just said that, "Oh, we're having this cool thing," versus the newer
pizza
employees
party.
just sharing the pizza party. And
Uh-huh.
you talked about this messaging up and down the totem pole. Designers have a very strong aversion to it. Like why do I need to go up and down the totem pole and doing all this messaging and convincing? Like, this idea is awesome. It should itself speak for itself. Why do I need to do this messaging? What advice would you give designers to, like, not necessarily make peace with it, but just kind of like look at it as like, but this is the way of things, and you can use that to your advantage?
Yeah. Well, that's a great question because it hints at something that I've been opening my mind up to more from great books is the context in which we design is very much just part of our design brief. And in some ways, the definition of a strategic designer is somebody who doesn't only design an artifact, but tries to create a permanent shift in the equilibrium of the system that it's going to exist within. That's a lot of concepts strung together there. Something more concrete would just be you're going to make something for your company, and it has to survive that company culture and context in order for it to make it through and have to be delivered and to be live and to make it there for your customers and users. And so messaging up and down the totem pole or just kind of playing, sometimes people call it playing politics, but in some ways it's really
Yes.
Being a strategic designer. Let's say you're asked to design a new park for a public city, public park for a city. A newbie designer might say, well, here it is. It's an amazing park. Check it out. In fact, it's so beautiful. Like, I'm not even gonna take questions. Like, you guys should just build this.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Or, hey, we tested it with some users. They love it. But the professional designer, this goes back to outcomes over output, says, I don't really care about the park. I really want to see more kids laughing. And so I'm obsessed with the outcome of what the park is supposed to deliver, which is an increased sense of community, increased public health, kids laughing, kids having fun, families meeting each other. That's the outcome of the park. I'm obsessed with that. Whether it's a park or a one-time party, I'm going to find a way to get there. And then when that goal has been shifted up, it's not the output. This is this great mantra, outcomes over output. I think every designer should just write that really big on their desk right now because that's something that needs to be said every day. How do I make sure I'm delivering on outcomes over output? And so as soon as you raise it from make an awesome park, in this example, to increase all those metrics of community we just talked about, then having to do all the messaging and PR with the mayor's office and the Parks and Rec department and the developers and the architects and the construction team. You're like, that's part of the game. That is part of the design brief. That is being a designer who's a strategic designer who cares more about the outcome than the output. And that's always what UX design has been about. It's, do our users love it? On the spectrum of art to design, in a way, art is about the output. Here's the thing. If you like it, I don't care. But design, we have to be judged by the people who use it. And the outcomes for them isn't about a park. It's about laughter and play. So I think when we put our eye up a bit higher and ask what's the outcome that's intended from this thing I'm supposed to make, all of a sudden our job description or what we're maybe comfortable doing, which is maybe this messaging up and down the totem pole, is totally fine because that's just it's part of the means to the end that's worth doing in and of itself.
I have so many things to say right now, but the first thing I'm going to say is that I wish as many as possible Fortune 500 companies could get Dave Huber as a consultant and really like just have them like hear your talk, your workshop or something, because I don't know, maybe it's your style, like how of a straight shooter you are, but the way you're making this sound suddenly doesn't seem that like this thing that like I'm a designer, I don't deal with that. Suddenly it's like, oh wow, that makes sense. Like, okay, so talking to everyone is not politics, it's part of the game. It's how it's supposed to be. It's not like I'm just creating this art and it's just my perspective of how it should be. There's people whose needs have to be involved in stuff. And I don't know, maybe the spin you're putting on it or the Dave spin is making so much sense to me. So that's what I wanted to say right away.
I appreciate that. Well, hats off to the people who I've learned from. I've got a book here on my desk which travels with me, and I've read it a couple times. I started with you before by the great Joshua Seiden, who I think did Lean UX. But outcomes over output is a huge mantra that I think all of our designers need to be focused on. With the small caveat that unchecked outcomes. In some ways, Facebook is a master at a lot of things we're talking about here. They measure what they're doing and they optimize metrics that have an impact on the business. And we see what happens when that runs out of hand. I mean, we basically have, a profiteering system that's just plowing people over at all costs. And so it can be a dangerous thing. So outcomes over output is super important, but we need to make sure that outcomes aren't just profit over everything. Which, if you're new to the business of design, you kind of start there. But at some point, if you get really good at it, you maybe make something that's kind of dangerous.
Absolutely. So consider the situation where you've got a designer at a company that's listened to this episode, read your article, get the business of design, understand that, but they're kind of in the middle of the totem pole, so they don't really have like the sway as maybe the chief design officer. And they're like, I'm in a company that's slowly understanding it's got design's got a seat at the table, they get it, but I don't know how to speak the language of design. I'm slowly learning it. I'm not involved in all those meetings yet. My product partners just come to me and be like, hey, this is the change we want you to do. So someone who's not high up the totem pole and they're listening to all this advice you're giving them, is there something they can do? Do they still have any kind of sway or power they can influence? Or is this like, don't even bother trying for them?
Yeah, absolutely. In some ways, I think those are some of the most critical players because they have, I think, a little bit more. Um, if it's not expected of you, it's kind of going above and beyond in a way, and I think it shows leadership. To me, it starts with a very simple question, which is, what are we trying to achieve, and how do we know if we'll be successful? Very simple question, and I think it's one we should ask all the time. And it's amazing. I think if you could be in 90% of teams, if you ask them to answer that question individually and share their answers, they'd be shocked that the answers are so different. So, well, I thought we were trying to do this. Well, I thought it was this. I mean, isn't this really what we're trying to do? And you're like, oh my God, we haven't even, how have we been working on this project for 3 months? And it's just now becoming evident that we're trying to solve different problems. So if you ask that question, what are we trying to achieve and how do we know if we're successful? With the 5 whys kind of in your back pocket there. So it says, well, we're trying to update our landing page and we'll be successful when it's done. Okay, well, that's an answer to that question, but it's not a great answer because you said, so it's really balancing out that outcomes over output. So it's basically, or you could ask, similar to how we'll be successful is, how are we making the company money or how are we saving the money? And that one's harder, as I say it out loud, because that's hard for anybody to answer. But it's what a team should know, because at the end of the year, when we all have to kind of reflect on what we've done for a company or up for a promotion, if you can say, I would really love to show how we're generating a bunch of money for the company with what we're doing. This seems really valuable. Is there a way we can quantify this? I feel like we're generating like millions of dollars for the company with this redesign. And I'd love for us to be able to report that back at the end of the year. That's maybe the best way to go about doing it because it's positive, it's collaborative, you're focused on the end in mind. Who's going to say no to that? So I'm prototyping and testing and iterating and refining here live on the spot a little bit. So I'll refine my
I love
answer to
that because
yeah.
suddenly we're talking about money and I think I'm realizing this, that as designers, we're so much focused on the visual and the craft side of thing that we don't realize that our counterparts that we spend time with, I'm talking about the product managers, the product owners, the business analysts, all these
Yeah.
people, they live and breathe business. They talk about numbers all the time.
Yeah.
And it is their job. They are hired for the sole job of meeting those business expectations. So in a way, now when I look at designers that complain about like, oh, I was in a meeting with a product manager and they just talked about this savings and this many turnover rate and this metric they got to hit. And, the designer was just like, I wish they would just focus on the design.
Mm.
I kind of get it now. I kind of get it why.
Yeah.
As designers, if we start speaking in the same language by saying instead of like, oh, I want to make this beautiful design, by saying that, hey, like you said, Dave,
Yeah.
I want to help us. I think we're contributing this many millions of dollars, but I would like to like quantify that. And I feel
Yeah.
like this design that me and my team are proposing can help get to that goal. And I feel like that's a much positive way that will help other stakeholders to really come at the table and be like, you know what, I'm interested in listening what you have to say there.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. I agree.
Wow. Oh my God. Like I'm so excited right now. I'm like, you know what? I've got all these like takeaways right now from Dave. I can't wait to go back to the office on Monday and tell my boss like, oh my God, like we got to do all these
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love that.
What advice would you, having run this program successfully at IBM, what are some of the, I guess, the learnings, mistakes, or things that work that you would just like probably like share that with someone who's maybe in a much early phase, but trying to implement the same success that you've had implementing this program? What would you tell them?
Yeah, for somebody who's in a position of overseeing a design program or influencing it and trying to help them increase their design maturity by being able to understand
Absolutely.
how design plays a strategic role for business, some of it goes back to that culture, which I like this definition of culture. One way to define it is simply its behavior over time. And it's pretty sensible definition, I think. If you see people exhibiting a certain behavior over time, that's a culture. I would kind of go back to habits because habits are how we operate. It's efficient for us. And so we're really trying to create habits and a culture around this. And when we frame it that way, there's some great literature to look at. There Hofstadter, this guy's got 5 elements of culture, which start with values, rituals, traditions, symbols, heroes, and practices. It's a combination of some of those. And so you do want to think about pushing on all of those. How do we celebrate the people who do what we value well in our culture? Let's create a culture around this. And so again, what that goes back to, there's a great book called The Power of Moments, and they talk about how they celebrate kids who are kind of graduating from high school in this new and exciting way, and they actually like doubled their graduation rate because they created a culture where the freshmen see the seniors being celebrated when they announce live to the auditorium which college they're going to. They have a culture there where they have a tradition and a ritual of celebrating and really, really celebrating those who achieve this new reinforced value of graduating, going to college. So building a culture around it. And I think one of the ways that happens is we find other leaders in that culture. So, you can't be one person. You got to say, hey, we are going to have a push to reinforce this value of ours, which is understanding the impact of our work. I need 10 people across the company who are going to help me with this, kind of hub and spoke model. Say, great, I'm going to give you some autonomy. But here's the outcome that we're going after. And this is somewhat similar to these kind of OKRs. Create rituals and traditions and ceremonies that help and give the education and instrumentation needed to track all of this stuff. So it goes back to that behavior formula: motivation, ability, and a trigger. That's how I think about it. Yeah.
And an example that comes to mind for me is, and you've seen this at many companies, where they had this thing where they celebrate people like this, because you're talking back to the graduation study you were referencing. So they have something called like a Design Rockstar or Design Award for some designers who've done really well. Maybe this is my take. A lot of times when I've been as part of those cultural programs on the receiving end or just witnessing it, there would be like a jam-packed schedule for like an hour, like what's happening in the company. And then there would be just like 5 minutes where it's like, okay, so this month's Design Rockstars are Dave, Janine, and this. And, and I don't know, like in that moment, it didn't feel like this thing that people wanted. It was like, oh, cool, like I got my name on stage and I was like quick, like they did this. And now that I'm thinking about what you just taught me, I'm like, how could they change that? What if like in that moment, instead of like celebrating like 15, 20 people, even if you've got like 100 designers, they spend that 5 minutes maybe just giving that to 1 or 2 people. And, like the chief design officer personally mentioned like what was a contribution. I don't know, like something that was like more engaging would make everyone want to like aspire to that level rather than just be like, this month's rock stars are this, and this people. Next month's rock star are this, and this people. And you get like, I don't know, like a $50 Starbucks gift card. It's not even about the money.
It's true.
So that example I'm thinking about, like, just a process created like Design Rockstars every month or design, awesome designers every month and the awards are given. They're not that effective. And I'm just like, there could be different ways to change that and make it like you said, like truly like cultural transformation where people really want that.
Yeah. It's not a bad start. It's tough. I mean, I recognize that is a common framework. Like we do that too, where it's like, yeah, you're a rock star. Here's, a couple extra dollars. But it doesn't seem to really be adopted culturally. And I think that's because it's still, like one person deciding maybe, or maybe there's kind of a voting thing, or it's just not reoccurring enough. It's kind of a one-time thing, kind of forget about it. So maybe if it's done more often. And then I think sometimes it's just lacking stories. We are the storied people and creature, and the truism of start with why And so if they just say, Janil is a rock star because he articulated the business impact, good job. And you're like, yep, that's the extent of our business of design program, is we celebrate somebody every month or year, quarter with a $200 gift card to Starbucks. It's lacking, I think, the story there. So even just recognizing that person is great, because people should be compensated and awarded and become a hero in a way that is part of culture. So it's a good start. But if they tell more of a story there and just say, hey, Jamil, we're working on this product, and he really wanted to improve these metrics, but he couldn't figure out how until he spoke with some of our users. And guess what he did? He decided, blah, blah. So the story goes on, and hopefully people tell that story. It should become, folklore in a way. So when other teams are saying, hey, we should try to win this award, they say, well, that actually reminds me of the time that Jamil won it, because they remember the story. A story is such a memorable, consumable thing. Packaging in the story, disseminating that, having people talk about it. Oh, I remember it must have been 3 years ago, he won that award or she won that award. And it was because they did this. Being able to tie that why and that story into it is, I think, a way to bolster that awards and recognition. But you're right, it's still not deep enough, because in some ways that's top down as opposed to kind of bottom up. I think that's often what's missing in these cultural programs, is that bottom up initiative. Yeah.
Mind blowing. How can designers get in touch with you if they have questions about learning more about business of design? Maybe they want to connect with you. What is the best way for them to get a hold of you or follow you or keep up with what's going
Yeah,
on?
LinkedIn's a great spot. I'm trying to post more content on there about this topic, because it's something that I think I'm passionate about, because not only in software or product design, but in nonprofit work, in political work. Let's say you work for a public government, a federal government, state government, being able to show how the work that you're doing is having an impact on the organization, an impact for users. So this is a really important topic for that reason. Thank you for hosting this podcast on it. But yeah, reach out to me on LinkedIn about it, and I'm excited to see what designers can do to shape the future.
Got it. Thank you so much, Dave, for coming on the show, man. It's been a blast.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.